Holmes that said something like, there's only one thing to ever heal, and that is the illusion that we are separate from God. And that song speaks to that. The only thing to ever heal is the illusion that we're separate from our source, separate from our Creator. Call it what you will. That every single issue that we experience comes down to that. We think that we're separate from this great creative power. And this philosophy says absolutely not separate. And it's a daily practice through reading, through coming to Sundays and listening to messages, through prayers, through music, through everything that we do, to practice and to remember day after day after day that one truth, that we are not separate from that one source that created us. It takes practice, and it's so worth it. So today, I stand in my power. I already said I lit the candle for divine power. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I'm going to approach this idea from 3 different angles today. The first one, human interactions. The second one, our divine nature. And the third one, taking stands in the world. So I'm starting with the idea of 2 words. And I'm going to use a lot today, the word power and the word divine nature. Or the 2 words, divine nature. And so I went to Holmes and looked up his definitions first, because I want to be on the same page when I say these words. So I've got them up here. Power, the energy by which everything lives. The energy by which everything lives. It's a synonym for God, really. And then the divine nature, the true nature of all things. So when you hear me say these words today, you'll know power is that energy by which everything lives, and our divine nature is the true nature of everything. We are divine, everything is divine, no matter where you look, there's divine power. So that's, just kind of put that in your mind, so when you hear these words, you go, I know what she means there. Now with these words, I want to just reference one thing. I'm not really going to talk about it, but I want to reference this book that's awesome. Another awesome book. It's called Power versus Force. I know some of you have read it because I've recommended it before. It's by a man named David R. Hawkins. And he did a whole bunch of testing. I'm not going to tell you all the explanation of the testing, but what he came up with was energy calibration. And he talked about how we vibrate at different energy levels and how that affects us in our life. And he talks about power versus force in a way that reminds us that power and force are not the same thing. He's talking about an inner power, which is what we're using today, not force. There's a very big difference. And the most fascinating part of this book is he's assigned numbers to vibrational levels, starting with 20, and that is shame. Brene Brown talks a whole lot about how we deal with shame. That vibrates at level 20. That's almost death. Seriously, it's almost death. And so that level of shame is not a vibration we want to stay in. We want to work on bringing ourselves up from that vibration. Even anger is a better vibration than something like shame. Even fear is a better vibration. Now, we'd all love to aspire to joy and love and peace and things like that. Those are way up there in the 500s. Not very many people get there. Not truly a vibrational arrival. But that's what we're doing. We're working on arriving at a high vibrational frequency, which to me simply means that I know that source that I'm talking about is within me no matter what I'm doing. So it helps me to vibrate at a higher level and not get stuck in things like shame and guilt and fear and anger. I think that our society, really, that's what we're about. Can we get ourselves up and out of shame, guilt, fear, anger? Because so many people are operating at that level. And what it shows up is as force. I have to force you to think my way. I have to fight you. We don't want to use force ever. Power, yes. What kind? Divine power. Not force. I want you to feel that difference, because force is combative. Power is standing in my power. So, this whole idea of human interactions. I'm going to start with this because this has been up for a whole lot of people lately. I've been having conversations and doing counseling and having lots of questions about this. When we are accused doing something wrong that we know in our heart we didn't do, how does that feel? Does it hurt?
No.
It hurts badly to be accused wrongly of something we know we didn't do. On the human level, what happens sometimes is those of us who feel like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? There's certain personality traits, and I've struggled with this, so I own it, that I want to take too much responsibility for the relationship.
No.
I put it on my shoulders as if I did it all wrong. Anybody relate?
No.
Because we're kind people. Kind people tend to want to say, I'm sorry, what did I do? Kind people want to say, I'm going to take responsibility for your feelings. Ooh, that's a downhill vibration. But isn't that what the feeling is? If you really think about it, it's like I'm somehow making myself responsible for you being upset with me or upset with whoever. Not a healthy thing. If we find ourselves groveling for somebody's love, not healthy. Not standing in our divine power. If we find ourselves so crushed by somebody else's behavior toward us, not healthy. It feels heavy and it hurts, but I've been hearing stories a lot lately that speak to this human interaction where somebody's accusing us. Now, I will quickly say that if you did something wrong, own it. If you did something wrong, say, you know what, I'm very sorry. This is what I've learned from this, and then move on. But what I know is that if somebody's accusing me of something that I know deep in my heart I didn't do, I have nothing to do about it except stand in my own power. Stand in my own truth that I didn't do anything here. Now, I'm not talking about stating responsibility. I already said that. If there's something that you did, fine, own it. But sometimes we can't convince the other person, you're accusing me falsely. We can't convince them. Sometimes we don't get that opportunity. So we stand in our own love. We stand in our own divine truth that this power is where we are. This is not tough and this is not forceful. There's no ego and there's no combat in this. Because the minute we're in combat, trying to get somebody else to think something else, our vibration just went down. So standing in our vibration of love and joy and peace means that we don't go by force and we don't combat and we don't try to convince, we just stand in our own power, which is loving and gentle and kind and so connected to that divine source that we just come back to our heart and say, all is well because I know who I am. Even if the other person never changes their mind about us, we have to know our truth. We're going to take a deep breath. Because I know that can feel very heavy. If somebody doesn't change their mind about us, it kind of hurts still. But we still stand in our kind, gentle, loving truth. And move on. So that's the part of standing in our power about the human interaction, which includes our divine nature. You've already heard me say the words now. Our divine nature, we want to stand so strong in that. Our true nature, that we don't get affected by what other people are thinking. So I already said my power. When I say my power, it's the God power. That God power is gentle, not forceful. It's not the way the world teaches us. The world teaches us force. Force. We've got to get mine by force. We don't have to get ours by force. We have been created in the image and likeness of something bigger than ours. And Holmes also says, but you've all got free will, so you have to discover it for yourself. And that's what we spend our time doing. We discover this for ourselves. I can tell you on a Sunday what I've learned, but each of you have to discover this for yourself. Standing in your own power no matter what. Standing in your divine nature no matter what. You've got to discover it on yourself. Take the time to discover it for yourself. Take the time to put your hand on your heart and go, who am I? Who am I? I'm not just Sean. I'm not just human. I'm also a spiritual being having this human experience. We've got to know that for ourselves, that we are divine beings. We are unique beings, like Sherry got through saying. Sometimes it means we have to be vulnerable in that uniqueness. But that vulnerable can be very strong. Because behind that